Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 43rd Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward through a massive outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, The People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 43rd of the celebration with the viper, that is the Russell's viper, and the saw-scaled viper as the species in focus, and the Chennai Snake Park as the zoo in focus. So joined in today to speak to us on this species is Dr. Abhijit Das. Dr. Abhijit is the scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India. He has done his doctorate in zoology from Utkal University, Orissa. His primary research focuses on the systematics and biogeography of herpetofauna in the Himalayan and the Indo-Burman biodiversity hotspots. His exploratory research in the Himalayan region has led to the discovery of 11 new species of herpetofauna, 1 new genus, and the rediscovery of 4 reptile species. He has also so far authored more than 90 scientific publications and co-authored 2 books. Today, he will speak to us more on the species in focus. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Arundhati. Although it's really cold here in Dehradun, not a great time for reptiles, but I feel it's a great opportunity to talk about them. So I really thank CZA for giving us this platform to talk about this poorly known species. And with that, I would like to share my screen. And if you can see the screen, if it is okay, can you see it now?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah, and am I audible clearly?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're audible clearly.
So again, thanks, and let me start with the topic, Russell's viper and saw-scale viper. So we are going to talk about these 2 species, which are just 2 species out of 32 species of vipers that are known from our country, and they are very unique, and vipers, as the name suggests, the viper name came from the viviparous habit, or the egg laying habit, which actually they give live birth to their offspring. So that's why the viper. So they, as a group of snake, they are the zenith of their evolution. So the most advanced reptile group that you can say. And they are characterized by a very short and stout body, a triangular head, which is very distinct from the rest of the body. And we can actually group them into 2 large groups. That is, one is called ground dwelling guild or arboreal guild. So most of these arboreal guilds of viper have a very prehensile tail, and most of these ground dwelling pit vipers are actually very large and stocky body. But out of these 32 species, as I said, Russell's viper and saw-scale viper takes a very, very special position for the fact that they are very famous in terms of the popularity, and they are really popular because because of their, one is widespread distribution in nature in our country, as well as their the general the popularity in terms of their venomous properties that is known from this our country. So with this background, I just want to go into the topic, and these are the 2 species that we are going to describe, Russell's viper and saw-scale viper. So this particular viper species are, you can actually say they are Afro-Mediterranean elements in our country. So basically, if you talk about soft scale viper, that is more African element into our into India. So you can actually have a group example, say lion or leopard in case of larger mammals, and in case of reptiles, this particular saw scale viper, which is more arid and xeric habitat specialists, are distributed in our country. On the other hand, the Russell viper, which is more like a Central Asian species, has invaded much deep into our country, has also gone into Southeast Asian region, some of the species. So among these two species, there is some commonality. There is one thing in common. Other than they are just vipers and they're venomous snake, this man connects these two species. The Patrick Russell, who was a polymath naturalist appointed by British Raj, and was active in Coromandel region of our country, which is currently Vishakhapatnam. So he is the one who actually contributed a lot, and probably also the first person who has experimented with the venomous snakes by injecting venom in mice, rats, and also dogs and cats. So he's probably the first one to deal with this venomous grouped animals, snakes into venomous and non-venomous. And these two species are actually described based on his paintings, as in the illustrations of Indian snakes volume. So the watercolor volumes are actually painted by some unknown Indian, but he's the one who actually compiled this. So Russell's viper is named after him, and this is something really interesting, that although Russell viper is also based on a painting of Patrick Russell, but that there is a specimen available. However, if you talk about soft scale viper, then the description is based on his painting, but the specimen is not available. So obviously, for his contribution, he is aptly called as the father of Indian ophiology. Now, we have this concept of big four in our country. So the big four consisted of two neurotoxic venomous property snake, common krait and spectacle cobra, and the two Russell's viper and saw scale viper, which is mainly known as hemotoxic. But then the saying only neurotoxic and hemotoxic may be a too much too much of easy term, but because many of those snakes actually have quite a mixture of venomous properties. For example, the Russell's viper venom, although is considered as a highly hemotoxic, but it also contain a lot of neurotoxic property. And again, in our country with such a diverse physiographic regions, the big four actually is a concept which is largely true for India, but may not be true for all of India, because those in site-specific nature, the species involved in venomous snake bite may differ or may be different. For example, in Northeast India, where there may be a completely different set of big four animals involved in snake bite things. But as of now, we really consider this Russell viper and saw scale viper within the big four criterion of our country. So let's know a little bit more about Russell's viper. So this is a species which is described by Shaw and Nodder in 1797, and that's how we write the scientific name italics and the author's name in the parenthesis. And then as I said, the name is based on the iconotype of Russell, and the specimen is there in British Museum. Interestingly, Russell viper has very interesting common names in eastern region, Orissa, and also in Bengal. It's known as Chandrobora, especially for the fact that the markings on the body is the reason for its name, which is like Chandra, means the moon shape markings. And also in Tamil, it is known as Kannari Viriyan, so which actually mean that, the mirror opposite kind of prints on its body, which actually signifies the importance of the blotch pattern in identifying the species as a distinct one. In Nepal, it's known as Gonus, which is very interesting for the fact that Gonus means go-nus. That is, the go means cow and the nose is nostril. So it's like the nostril of the snake is so large, so huge. That's why it's known as Gonus, or almost similar to the cow nose. And the name Daboya is perhaps came from Dabua, which is the Hindi name of the species, and that's how it's probably came as Daboya. And Russell is after Patrick Russell. The snake grows considerably large in size. The males are slightly longer and slimmer than females, and they may grow up to almost 2 meters, and they can produce up to 40 live youngs. Okay, so the species is known to be distributed almost up to 3,000-meter elevation in parts of South India and also in Nepal in some parts. And it is really, really widespread in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and also Sri Lanka. But the interesting part is that the Russell viper has a very, very patchy and discontinuous distribution in Northeast India, where there are many other species of ground-dwelling pit vipers are found. For example, ovophis and protobothrops, which are very common in the hilly areas. So in Northeast India, Russell viper is perhaps could only invade in the Assam plain to the westernmost region. And there is a isolated population in Manipur Valley, which we need to study more and because this is an evolutionarily distinct population. So if we go next, then there are some very distinct differences with this arboreal and terrestrial guild of other pit vipers. So for example, pit vipers have a loreal pit, which is very distinct in all the pit vipers, and many of them have a prehensile tail. But in case of Russell viper, the loreal pit is absent, and it's actually taken over by a very, very large nostril, which is probably the reason why this the hissing of Russell viper is so loud. It's almost compared with a pressure cooker. So there are a lot of variations within the population of Russell viper. From Goa, there are so many different varieties, and also from southern India, there are so many different color morph, or you can say leucistic, albinistic animals were reported. But one thing is very, very interesting, that Russell viper has very distinctive patterns on their body. So Russell viper is one of the candidate snake species which can be, whose population can be estimated using photographic mark recapture technique, which has not been tried out in our country, but we have developed this method in case of frogs. So Russell viper is a perfect example where actually photographic mark recapture technique can give you a population data which is completely lacking in any Indian snake so far. If we go to the natural history studies, there are very, very few, although they are very famous snake, globally renowned, but the natural history information is extremely lacking for these famous snakes. Recently, some very good information has come out through a study by Glodus in 2021. He has used radio telemetry to delineate some of those natural history aspect of the Russell's viper. For example, he has found that this species particularly uses plantations and scurf forest to a very high extent. Plantation is probably the highest with 33% of occurrence record, and human habitation is perhaps the lowest occurrence record. But in our country, where we see Russell viper is considered as one of the most dangerously venomous snake, with so much of snake bite issues, snake bite cases actually happening in the plantation areas. where a lot of people are working and in our agricultural field or in plantations where they are very, very common, or their habitat usage is quite high. So, and coming inside a human habitation and biting human being is actually very less for Russell Viper. So you need to be really outdoor to have an encounter with Russell Viper. Similarly, this study also have found out specific activity pattern for these snakes, like peak busking of the snakes occur in January and February, and peak ambush actually happens in May. And there are two movement peaks in the activity pattern of these snakes that has been recorded. So what is the point is that this kind of study, site specific study, is very important, because this actually gives us a lot of information to generate awareness among people that what kind of habitat and at what point of time and how these venomous snakes are utilizing to avoid such dangerous encounter of snake bite incidents. So still we need a lot of data, and that's why more natural history information is needed, and more similar studies need to be done in many other parts of our country to have those site specific information of the species, which is very, very widely distributed in our country. So Russell's viper often mistaken as some of the very, very similarly looking species, like rock python babies sometimes looks like Russell's viper. There are instances where people were bitten by Russell viper thinking that it is a python baby. At the same time, common sand boa also resembles sometime with Russell's viper. But again, if we see Russell viper, we can distinguish Russell viper from all other blotched pattern snake by observing a very well-defined blotches on their body, which again was focused just now through their common names, like in Tamil and Bengali. So these are very well-defined spots that are not there in case of python and sand boa, which are very irregular patterns on their body. And also the scale patterns also differ sometimes. For example, pythons and boas, most of them have quite the body scales or the dorsal scales are quite plain, so there is no kill. Kills are very rigid regions of the scales, which in Russell viper the scales are highly keeled. So these are some of the taxonomic features by which we can easily identify vipers from other snake. If we talk about Echis carinatus, again, this is another species which is known by quite a few common names in our country. One interesting name in Punjab is known as jalebi. So basically, it's probably because of the shape of the snake that it assumes during its defensive posture. And it is very interesting to know that this particular species is actually can generate sound by rubbing the scales against body. So the name Echis itself, it is Echis comes from, which is the Greek meaning of viper, and carinatus mean the scales are highly carinated or rough. So that's the reason why they can actually produce a skin for a sound. But the point is that this snake really grows really small. The largest growing the clade, which is the westernmost western subspecies so far considered as it is can grow up to almost 1 meter. However, there are some, the Central Indian and the East Indian population is really small, maybe almost 30 centimeter long. But and because of its really small size, it is a dangerous species, because hardly it can be seen. And people often come across with this bite of this snake, but the bite of the species is so fast. it is so agile and so fast that even many of the bites, although it strikes very rapidly, but the venom quantity may not be delivered as the Russell's viper way, because Russell viper is known to actually bite and chew and deliver a lot of venom, which is very, very dangerous. But in case of Fursa or the Echis carinatus, there are a lot of bite, but then there may be not that many medical death or medical emergencies in case of this bite. But although it's a dangerous species, it is considered as one of the big four of our country. And it has much western distribution. There are almost 12 species of H's in the world, and out of that we have only one species so far. There is a lot of taxonomic ambiguity. For example, as I said, the South Indian, Central Indian, and East Indian population is really small in size. But if you go to Western India, so for example, Gujarat, Rajasthan, where you have a subspecies called Sauchuriki, which actually grows really, really big. And there are many herpetologists are of the opinion that they are two distinct species. So the behavior of scale rubbing against a stationary body is like a very interesting one. It has been very interestingly documented in this photograph by Dhritiman Mukherjee, where you can see the head of the snake is still and the body is moving. So that's the beauty of the snake, and that's why it can produce those sound or noise as a anti-predator mechanism. If you see, in India, India is known as the top country in the world for snake bite issues. There are almost 47,000 fatalities are happening in our country per year, which is the highest in the world. And it has been discussed length and breadth throughout the various literature. And when we talk about Russell viper, then it is one of the species which is involved in maximum number of snake bite in our country. It's a very dangerous species, although it's a large in size, but actually there are a lot of fatalities are happening in our countries compared to other venomous big four of India. So that's actually leads to, and the viper's bite actually leads to a lot of medical emergencies. For example, the gum bleeding is one of the key feature, and severe coagulopathy may happen with associated neurotoxic symptoms like neck breaking and other things. And if proper treatment is not given, the patient will succumb to its injuries. So that's something really, really dangerous for many parts, especially in rural India. And if you see the pattern, there is no much pattern like when the snake bite is happening. It's almost all the time. So but there is a definite peak of snake bite during monsoon season, which has been reported in many journals. However, with this slide, I just want to say that Russell viper are considered the most dreaded snake of our country in terms of snake bite mortalities. However, there are different reasons to this, like why in India so much of snake bite is happening. One reason maybe there are too much of human density, or there may be too much of site-specific venomous snake density. And the third reason may be there are a lot of people are actually into agricultural profession, and in agricultural areas or the plantation area, from the radiotelemetry study also, we know that Russell vipers are very, very much prevalent in those areas. So these factors may be confounding one for snake bite in our countries. So what we can do, actually, it is always better. Prevention is better than cure. So I just want to tell all the listeners through this presentation is that, please be watchful. If you are really watchful and with a slight precautionary measure, you actually can avoid snake bite. Just for example, walking in the night with a torchlight, not getting out with a barefoot or a chapel. Keep your house rat and rodent free. Do not pile up woods and debris, tiles, bricks near your house, which attracts snakes to hide. And if somebody is sleeping outside, then use mosquito nets and other things. And never try to do catch, kill, or do selfie or stuff like that with the snake. So these are very dangerous things, and with this we actually can mitigate a lot of snake bite in our country. Because, and if the snake bite happens, our main focus should be, we should reach hospital as soon as possible. That's the main thing, because most of our hospitals are now equipped with the anti-snake venom, where it works against Russell viper and saw scale viper venom. The idea is, and then our, with the current road network, even in the village areas, there is obviously, if from the very beginning there is an effort made, we can reach to any preliminary hospital facilities within 1 hour. So I really bet for that. There may be some really remote places in Arunachal Pradesh or some place in Mizoram, but still in most of the areas where Russell viper and saw scale viper are there, still we have anti-venom centers very close. For example, in one of the most remotest place, even Khana Tiger Reserve stock anti-venom in their primary healthcare facility. So these kind of examples are also there with us. So when there is a snake bite, you must have seen a very popular movie, and I just want to show this photograph for you to know that just do that. It's an emergency, rush to hospital. Do not wait for vehicle. If there's a scooty or a bike, also take it and just go there and within the hospital and say that it's an emergency. So with that note, I would like to thank Cesare again for giving me this opportunity. And if there is a question, I can take it.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for the overview of both species and of the research that is kind of done on them. We will take question answers for this session at the end. We now move on to the Know Your Zoo talk. So joined in today to speak to us on the zoo is Dr. S.R. Ganesh, who is the scientist and the deputy director of the Chennai Snake Park. So Dr. Ganesh has done his doctorate in wildlife biology from the University of Madras. His primary research interests lie in the field of herpetology, and he documents lesser explored biomes, likes to refine species characterizations and mapping current distribution patterns of southern India's herpetofauna. In his career so far, he has authored nearly 100 journal articles, which include 18 new species distributions. He is also a member of the IUCN Amphibian and Reptile Specialist Group and the IUCN Viper Specialist Group. So today he will speak to us more on the zoo. Dr. Abhijit, are you facing some issue in the
Yeah,
sharing?
am I, is it
Yes.
cut? Yeah,
Yeah, it's the, I can
stop.
still, yes, it's done.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Dr. Ganesh, please, if you could now take over. So you're muted, if you can unmute yourself. Dr. Ganesh, you need to unmute yourself. You're muted. Are you able to see the mute and unmute option that comes at the bottom of the screen? So if you take your cursor towards the top, there'll be a drop-down menu that will come. Or okay, now you can see the mute and unmute option. It'll be at the bottom, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, now the
Sorry for
audio
the
is there.
confusion.
Yes, no problem. So you can now just start sharing.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah. First of all, our hearty thanks for the Central Zoo Authority for organizing this webinar on a lot of wildlife, especially about snakes. And given our zoo, this year is a special year for us. It's a Golden Jubilee celebration for Chennai Snake Park, and greetings from our institution to all our friends out there. We are the first organization, the first reptile park in the country, which was started in 1972. That's like 50 years ago now. And the express purpose of starting this organization, starting the zoo, was to conserve and educate public about reptiles, to impart knowledge and training on Indian reptiles, especially snakes, to a lot of people. In our zoo, we are often faced with this question that snakes are not that kind of wildlife like, say, an elephant or a leopard or a lion or tigers, for which any person has to go to a protected area like a tiger reserve or a national park or a wildlife sanctuary to see. Snakes are that kind of wildlife that anyone can manage to see even in and around his homesteads, near the gardens, near our own townships. So, in that being the case, why to have a zoo specifically focused on that kind of wildlife, which are liable to be seen by people even outside the zoo premises, right? So, faced with this question, we often ask back people telling like, okay, so when we people see a snake in the wild, more often or not, it's just a head and neck peeping out of the hole, or a snake quickly whipping through the path, or just a tail disappearing into the bushes. Only that much of a snake do we get to see should it happen in the wild. But in a captive facility like a zoo, any person can enjoy the luxury of getting to see or watch a snake from a reasonably close quarters for as long as a time he wants. And it is that kind of close look and continued watching of a snake which is going to later enable the person to recollect the image of the snake or its appearance, so that he could at least try to identify or figure out whether the snake he would potentially see in the future might or might not be a venomous snake. So these are the rationale for starting a serpentarium, for starting a zoo that's focused primarily for snakes. Despite being animal groups which people could very well see outside, this is one important and vital reason for serpentariums to promote and evolve into captive facility centers that display common and necessarily important snakes for the public to see. So in our zoo, this is a 1 acre zoo. The area of the zoo is around 1 acre, and it's a campus that is present inside the forest land, which is quite close to the Guindy National Park, one of the few national parks that are living side by side within a metropolitan city. And we have a lot of visitors coming in, at least that used to be the case by and large. And this is just a small history of our organization. This is India's first reptile park, and it was started in 1972, as I told you. And this is one such conservation initiative, similar to the Indian Wildlife Protection Act itself, which was formulated in 1972. Project Tiger, Project Elephant, Project Crocodile, all these conservation interventions happened in 1972. So that was the time when a lot of such budding ideas were formulated to effectively conserve wildlife resources in our country. And these are the people, the gentlemen who were responsible for starting this zoo. I'm just reading it right away from our website. It includes Mr. Romulus Whittaker and his mom, and M. Krishnan, Mr. Harry Miller, Dr. Rajendran, M.V. Rajendran, an expert on neuropeltic snakes, and Dr. A.N. Jagannatha Rao, Meenakshi Sundaram, and then Mr. B. Vijayaraghavan, IAS, and Dr. M.V. T.S.N. Murthy, Dr. A.V. Gopalakrishnan, and a lot of such naturalists have started this organization. And now this place is being maintained by the Chennai Snake Park Trust, headed by our executive chairman, Dr. S. Paulraj, IFS retired. And we also have a research affiliation with the University of Madras. That's one of the prestigious academic institutions that we have in the city. And we are glad to share that we have ongoing research. A lot of research activities are happening in this place. So ex situ reptile conservation is the major focal purpose of this park, as snakes are also indiscriminately getting killed by people on site. A lot of people, including educated people, urban lot, they have irrational fear and disgust about snakes. And this is one of the major reasons why a center is required to demystify snakes, to not show them on bad light, one that they just don't deserve, but to impart proper knowledge and scientific information about snakes in general, especially the venomous ones. Also, to undertake captive breeding program and rearing exercises, this has resulted in a sizable population of threatened reptiles in captivity. For example, our zoo is a nodal agency zoo for captive breeding of endangered snakes like pythons. So Schedule 1 species like the Indian rock python, the reticulated python. These are some of the python species that we have had in our zoo and for which we have had a successful track record of breeding in captive facilities. So as a small recap of our previous slides, our zoo has also done a lot of herpetological expeditions in various parts of the country. Some of the oldest expeditions happened in the Andaman Nicobar Islands during the 1970s, and later in the 1980s, it was in the Narmada Valley in central India, Bilaspur again in central India, Visakhapatnam in the Coromandel Coast, Valparai and Sirvani parts of the Western Ghats. So a team of scientists from Chennai Snake Park have surveyed and documented the reptile distributions and diversities in all these regions. And we have had stints with studies on gharials and freshwater turtles, as well as sea turtles, have all been managed by members from our zoo. Later on, surveys of lizards and pit vipers were conducted in parts of Western Ghats in Tamil Nadu state. So here's a list of dissertations, project works that have been done based on research at the Chennai Snake Park. Being a deputy director and interested with the work of supervising scientific activities here, I would be rather presenting more on the scientific aspects and works that have been done in the snake park. And these are some of the projects which have been done from our institute, starting from 1990 all the way till recent days. Chennai Snake Park is also famous for having a lot of books and publications to its credit. Our office has brought out a lot of important and pictorial handbook to make scientific facts that are easily palatable and assimilable for the popular audience. It covers both quasi-scientific, technical, as well as popular readership. And there is a journal, by the way, by the name Cobra, that's published by the Chennai Snake Park Trust. It started in 1990 and it's still going on. As a modest scientific periodical, it comes out once in every 4 months, containing articles exclusively on Indian herpetology. It serves as one of the major publication outlet for the past scientific works, and it's also has the distinction of being the only exclusive Indian herpetological journal. Other journals that are run in India and focused on herpetology also caters to the needs of adjacent countries, whereas this journal is exclusively for Indian scientists and readership. In 2003, it was awarded a scientific journal status, and several scientists from all the way from Kashmir to Assam and Rajasthan and Andaman Nicobar have actively published in our journal. Scientists from reputed wildlife institutes such as WII, Indian Institute of Science, Bombay Natural History Society, Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History, and Zoological Survey of India have contributed research work to our journal, and it has published on virtually all aspects of reptile and amphibian biology. And it also has the distinction of one of the very few scientific journals that is run by a zoo in India. So here's a list of some of the journals in which articles have appeared based on work or collaborations with the Chennai Snake Park team. And recent research on this aspect from this zoo has focused largely on systematic and taxonomic work on snakes. Over the years, we have collaborated with other scientists from other reputed organizations and brought out significant contributions to studies on snake diversity in our country. A lot of new species of snakes have been described based on collaborative research, which also involved Chennai Snake Park. Some of the examples are the Gower shield-tailed snake from the Eastern Ghats, the yellow-green cat snake from the dry forest of India, the Travancore vine snake from parts of southern Western Ghats, and lots of different new species of vine snakes from several parts of the Western Ghats. We have the Deccan wolf snakes from parts of Deccan Plateau and Eastern Ghats, Rajendran's shield-tail and Jordan's shield-tail from parts of Eastern Ghats, and some new species of pit vipers. This focus talk mainly having bearing on vipers. We have two new species of vipers that were described recently in the sense last year, from Agastyamalai Mountains from the southern Western Ghats. And we also have named some skinks and agamids and amphibians. So these are some of the new taxonomic contributions that are based on research work done in collaboration with the team from Chennai Snake Park. A continuation of some of the new taxa of snakes that we described and of other herpetofauna, including lizards and amphibians that we described. So when we look at the localities from where all these expeditions have been conducted or all these species have been described, they pretty much cover the length and breadth of the peninsular India from several ecoregions from the Western Ghats, the Eastern Ghats, the Deccan Plateau, the Coromandel Coast, and the Malabar Plains. So from virtually all kinds of habitats and ecoregions that are present in peninsular India, scientists from our organization have conducted surveys, did the studies, and based on collections that are done from other organizations such as the Zoological Survey of India and the Indian Institute of Science, to name a few, our scientists have collaborated and described and discovered all these new kinds of reptiles and amphibians present in our country. And this is a customized list of some of the leading organizations in India that are arranged alphabetically. HETRI, that's found in Karnataka, BNHS in Maharashtra, Center for Ecological Sciences again in Karnataka, Chennai Snake Park, our own office, National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore, Nature Conservation Foundation again in Karnataka, Madras Crocodile Bank, which is our neighboring zoo here in Chennai, and SACON that is present in Tamil Nadu, University of Delhi, the Life Sciences Department, Wildlife Institute of India, and which is in Dehradun, and we have Zoological Survey of India, which a bunch of branch offices in many parts of the country. So because of our track records with conservation, education, and also on research on reptiles, especially snakes, the research affiliation with the universities and all these things, because of our past activities, we are glad to share that we are on par with many of the leading institutions on wildlife. So thank you for this short and sweet presentation. I'll be happy to take questions if any.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for giving a brief overview of the zoo and the kind of studies that are undertaken at the Chennai Snake Park. So we now move on to question and answers. So, Dr. Abhijit, are you there? We'll take question and answers for the species first.
Yes.
Okay. So, sir, the first question for you is that vipers conceivably are the most feared species of snake found in India. But they're also popular species in zoos. What do you think zoos can do in terms of, communicating of, spreading awareness about the species and communicating information on the biology and everything to visitors?
I think this is a very nice question and pertinent to the platform also. I think the whole idea of zoo in terms of herpetological exhibits is probably awareness generation. We do not have many species which are in the zoo for captive breeding and for the reasons for that, but awareness generation is the key aspect. I have seen some zoo with very good information about the species and some of those identification characteristics of the species in the field. But I think we need to go a little beyond, and if we just uh, talk about this big four which are almost everywhere in our zoo, short movies, if we can produce and can be showcased to the visiting people to the zoo in the snake visiting facility in the zoos. I think that is going to help a lot, because there are many things uh, which for example, the look-alike species in our countries, and if those can be added as a awareness material, so that should be done. And also the other aspects need to be shown. For example, Russell viper and saw scale vipers are only thought as a dangerous snakes, but the medical aspect of it, because these species are known to produce, known to have the anticoagulation property. So the venom of saw scale viper has been used as an anticoagulant drug in many countries. So those aspects also as an option value for future generation can be portrayed. And the importance of those animals. For example, we have seen photographs of bullfrog eating Russell viper, and Russell viper also eating cobra. So those also been very popular in media. So their ecological role as a predator as well as prey can also be showcased. So a lot of role for zoo in our country.
All right, sir. And sir, the next question for you is that are there any natural predators of the two vipers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, as I said just now, that even bullfrog can eat a small Russell viper. And I have personally seen very large centipede eating saw scale viper in Krishnan Kovil of Tamil Nadu. So they are there. Many birds do feed on them, and also I think some mammals also quite happy to have a very large Russell viper in this, and even the snakes eating other snakes. There are also a lot of examples in there. So there are a lot of natural predators for those species.
All right, sir. And so the last question for you is that the viper species is now part of the urban ecology and landscapes as such. So when you have encounters with them being recorded from heart of cities, why do you think these species, I think you've already mentioned this in the slide, but I think just a reiteration that why do you think these species seem to frequent the urban hotspots, and what can people do to avoid accidents?
Um, yeah, so in case of Russell Viper and Sawscale Viper, the whole India is a kind of hotspot for them, and cities are growing everywhere. So it is possible that we will keep on encountering more and more of the snakes in our city limits, so-called city limits. But as I said, we can take very few precautions to avoid those. For example, cleanliness is a very, very important aspect of keeping snake away, and also our outdoor activities, having more informed outdoor activities. For example, nowadays in our cities, in the park and garden, the walkers and joggers are increasing day by day. So in those parks, there are a lot of in this particular season, you can see a lot of saw scale viper also in those small bushes, as well as Russell's viper hiding or completely camouflaging with the surrounding. So even in our all those urban setups, there should be warning signals not to deviate much, and there should be proper management of all those things to avoid dangerous incidences. But this is a necessary evil. We have to learn living with it. There is no running away from it, because even if you remove a snake from one area, the niche will not be unoccupied. It will be taken over by some other venomous species. So it's a win-win situation for us if we learn.
All right, sir. So I think those were the questions for you. And we now move on to questions for the zoos part. So, Dr. Ganesh, the first question for you is that the Chennai Snake Park is possibly the first specialized reptile zoo in the country. What have been the challenges that you have faced to run the facility and stay focused on snake conservation and awareness?
Right. So the major challenge that we face in largely keeping snakes in captivity is to find enough feed for them, right? Because many of the snakes are specialist feeders. And most of the feed that we get for our snakes, for example, fishes for water snakes, and for larger land snakes like cobras and rat snakes, we get them chicks and like fledgling birds, and rats and mice for the vast majority of snakes, that being the staple prey item for most of the common Indian snake species. So this was the major task. Like, for example, we also have crocodiles, and we also have turtles in our zoo. But if we were to feed crocodiles, it's rather simple, because all we need to do is just go to a meat supply market, and then get the amount of meat that we require, do the quality check, consult with the veterinarian, and disperse of the feed to the zoo animals. It's that simple. But when it comes to feeding of snakes, because of all these intricacies and even fetching or sourcing the mice and the rats from farmlands and other such agricultural regions, these are some of the challenges that we face, that we have been facing right from its inception. Yeah.
Right, sir. All right, sir.
Sorry.
Yes. Did you want to add to it, or?
Yeah, about the next thing is about breeding. For example, pythons are one of the key species of snakes that we at the snake park have always focused on as far as breeding is concerned. So every time our keepers need to watch out for the behavior of the pythons, especially as the breeding season approaches, and take appropriate measures as and when necessary.
Okay. So the next question for you is that what are the community engagement initiatives that are run by the zoo to spread the message of snake conservation and welfare? Are there any that are taken up by the zoo as such?
Yeah, very important and pertinent question to our zoo. And in Tamil Nadu, there is a group of tribes known as the Irulas, who are well versed and experts on snakes. So because of their historical hunter-gatherer operations and occupation, they have had a lot of finesse and technical knowledge that are passed on from the father to son. That kind of traditional knowledge are present in a lot of Irula tribals even today. And Chennai Snake Park has involved a lot of such tribal members for pro-conservation initiative actions. Like we give them and we entrust them with jobs such as enclosure keepers or animal keepers, so that we use their core competence for conserving snakes. Historically, they were associated with, like in the 1950s and 60s, they were associated with occupations that are rather detrimental to snake population. They are now weaned out of all those things after the intervention of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act and the Forest Department. This is going to be a very good alternate livelihood for such community members.
All right, so and so the last question for you is that what is the species that is most attractive and engaging for visitors who come to the Chennai Snake Park? Is there any specific?
The most attractive snake in our zoo, at least like I have been in the zoo some 13, 14 years now, any snake that is the snake which is going to grasp the attention of the public, right? Because most of the snake are night active and they would just be resting. But many of the people who come here, especially the kids, children who are much more fascinated and fond of looking at the zoo animals, anytime the snake moves, be it whatever snake, tiny or large or green or brown or in whatever form and shape they are, if it moves, that's going to grab the attention of the visitors, because they all are eagerly waiting for movement of animals inside the zoos.
All right, sir. So I think those were the questions for you. We do not have any more questions. So with this, we'll wrap up our 43rd Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. So on behalf of the Central Zoo Authority, I would like to thank both Dr. Abhijit and to you, Dr. Ganesh, for taking time out of your schedule and joining us for this talk. I would also like to thank the audience for being with us throughout and being patient with us. I'd also like to inform them that next week on Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. we'll be back with a 44th week talk, which would be on the clouded leopard and the Safai Jala Zoological Park. So do tune in for that talk from 4 to 5 p.m. next week. And Chennai Snake Park will continue the outreach activities till the end of this week. So do visit their zoo to know more on what they have planned. So thank you so much once again. Namaskar.
Namaskar.